You literally couldn't script this. If a Hollywood writer pitched this scenario to a studio executive, that a president who spent half a decade building his entire political identity around the stamina of his opponent, branding him Sleepy Joe at every rally, would then be caught on camera visibly dozing off in the middle of his own cabinet meeting, that writer would be laughed out of the room for being too derivative, too obvious, too on the nose. But here we are. This is reality in 2025. By now, you have undoubtedly seen the clip. It is everywhere. It's the video that Governor Gavin Newsom shared, the one that is currently breaking the internet, showing Donald Trump sitting at the head of the table, flanked by his hand-picked loyalists, with his eyes completely shut. And I don't mean blinking. I don't mean looking down at notes. I mean lights out. While Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is droning on, the commander-in-chief looks like he's waiting for a flight in an airport lounge at 3 a.m. And let's just take a second to appreciate the staggering, monumental level of projection we are witnessing here. For years, we had to sit through the agonizing spectacle of Trump and his right-wing media echo chamber dissecting every single micro-movement of Joe Biden. If Biden stumbled on a word, senile. If Biden walked stiffly, frail. If Biden closed his eyes for 2 seconds to pray, Sleepy Joe. They put it on t-shirts, they put it on hats, they made it the central thesis of their campaign. I am strong, he is weak. I am awake, he is asleep. So you would think, you would hope, that the one single thing Donald Trump would make sure he doesn't do is fall asleep on camera. But he couldn't even do that. Because at the end of the day, every accusation from these people is actually a confession.
And look, if this were just an old man taking a nap, maybe we move on. But it's the reaction from the White House that tells you everything you need to know about the contempt they have for your intelligence. Because they didn't come out and say, hey, the president is human, he's tired. No, that would require a relationship with the truth. Instead, we have Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt looking the American press corps in the eye and telling them that the president wasn't sleeping, he was listening attentively. Listening attentively. Give me a break. We have eyes, we can see the video. They are literally trying to gaslight you into believing that unconsciousness is actually a form of hyperfocus. It is the alternative facts era all over again. But this time, instead of crowd sizes, they are trying to redefine the biological act of sleep. They want you to believe that while the rest of the world saw a man dozing off, what actually happened was a display of epic stamina during a marathon meeting. And here's the kicker, the part that makes this so much worse than just a funny viral moment. Why was he so tired? Was he up late solving the Middle East crisis? Was he poring over economic data to fix inflation? No, we know exactly what he was doing because we have the timestamps. He was up until midnight and then back up before dawn, rage posting on Truth Social. We're talking about 160 posts in a single night. This is not a man diligently working for the American people. This is a man with no impulse control, doom scrolling and shouting into the digital void until his battery runs out, and then showing up to run the country completely gassed. Make no mistake, this isn't just about an app. This is about a president who demands you ignore reality to service his ego. And frankly, it's humiliating.
Let's look at the tape. I want you to really look at it. This video isn't from some hidden camera or a blurry cell phone in the back of a rally. This is the official feed from inside the cabinet room. The President of the United States is seated at the center of power. To his left, you have Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. To his right, the Secretary of State. And for extended periods, not seconds, but stretches of time, Donald Trump is motionless. His chin is tucked into his chest. His eyes are sealed shut. At one point, Secretary Lutnick is in the middle of praising the administration's economic achievements, literally flattering the man sitting next to him, and Trump doesn't even blink. He doesn't nod, he doesn't react. He is physically present, but mentally absent. Now, compare this to the standard they set for Joe Biden. Do you remember the resting eyes video from the climate summit? Do you remember the absolute meltdown on Fox News because Biden closed his eyes for 3 seconds during a prayer? They ran that loop for weeks. Sean Hannity did entire monologues on it. They called it evidence of cognitive decline. They called it a national security risk. So by their own logic, by the very rules of engagement they wrote, what we are watching in this cabinet meeting is a national security risk. But wait, it gets better. Because when the press asked the White House about this, did they say the president is human? Did they say it's been a long week? No, they went full North Korea. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt released a statement saying, and I quote, "President Trump was listening attentively and running the entire 3-hour cabinet meeting. Marathon?
Since when is a 3-hour meeting a marathon for the leader of the free world? Most Americans work 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Nurses work 12-hour shifts on their feet. Truck drivers drive for 11 hours straight. But we are supposed to believe that sitting in a cushioned leather chair for 180 minutes is a feat of endurance so grueling that it justifies passing out in front of your own staff? And let's talk about this listening attentively excuse. This is the exact same line Trump used during his New York criminal trials in 2024. Remember that? When reporters, including Maggie Haberman from the New York Times, saw him sleeping in court? Trump tweeted, "I simply close my beautiful blue eyes, sometimes listen intensely, and take it all in." He is literally using the "I'm not sleeping, I'm resting my eyes" excuse that toddlers use when they don't want to take a nap. But here is the forensic evidence that destroys the "he was working hard" defense. We know why he was tired. We have the receipts. If you look at his Truth Social account, the night before this marathon meeting, Donald Trump was on a bender. Between 7 p.m. and midnight, he posted or reposted over 160 times. Let that sink in. 160 times. That is roughly one post every 2 minutes for 5 hours straight. And he wasn't done. He was back online before 6 a.m. the next morning, posting again. This wasn't a president reviewing intelligence briefings. This wasn't a leader studying policy papers for the cabinet meeting. This was an 84-year-old man glued to his phone, doom-scrolling, raging at his enemies, and reposting memes in the middle of the night. He wasn't exhausted from serving the people. He was hungover from his own dopamine addiction. And this is where the hypocrisy becomes disqualifying, because for 5 years, they told us that Joe Biden was too old. They told us he didn't have the energy. They told us he was Sleepy Joe because he went to bed at a reasonable hour to rest for the job. Now, we have a president who stays up all night tweeting like a teenager, shows up to work, and falls asleep while his commerce secretary is talking. And they have the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall to tell you that this is what strength looks like. They are pissing on your leg and telling you it's a marathon. But if you think this is just about one bad night, if you think this is just a case of the president stayed up too late on his phone, you are missing the forest for the trees. Because this isn't a glitch, this isn't an isolated incident, this is the entire architecture of the MAGA movement crumbling before your very eyes. We need to zoom out. We need to look at the pattern, because what we are witnessing right now is the inevitable collapse of the Superman myth that Donald Trump has spent decades constructing. Think about it. What is the one thing, the one consistent thing Trump has done to every single political opponent he has ever faced? He attacks their vitality. He attacks their strength. He called Jeb Bush low energy. He called Hillary Clinton unstable. And of course, he spent 4 years screaming Sleepy Joe from the rooftops. But in the world of Donald Trump, every accusation is a confession. He calls people corrupt? Look at his business dealings. He calls people liars? Check the fact checkers. He calls people sleepy? Look at the video of him in the cabinet room. He projects his own deepest insecurities onto his enemies because he knows exactly what his own weaknesses are. He knew he was the one losing a step. He knew he was the one struggling to keep up. So the strategy was simple. Accuse the other guy first. Accuse him louder. Accuse him so relentlessly that by the time anyone notices you are falling asleep, the narrative is already set. And this pattern of physical decline masked by bravado didn't start yesterday. Do you remember the G7 summit in Sicily back in 2017? It was only a few months into his first term. The leaders of the G7, Macron, Merkel, Gentiloni, Trudeau, they all walked 700 yards up a hill to take a photo at a historic piazza. 700 yards. That is not a marathon. That is a light stroll. But Donald Trump? He couldn't do it. He waited behind for a golf cart to drive him up the hill while the other world leaders walked. That was 8 years ago. Do you remember the ramp at West Point in 2020? The slippery ramp? We watched him shuffle down that ramp like he was walking on ice, terrified of losing his balance. And when the media pointed it out, what did he do? He spent 10 minutes at his next rally reenacting it, screaming that the ramp was a death trap, trying to convince his cult that his inability to walk down a gentle slope was actually a display of caution and genius. Do you remember the two-handed water sip? These aren't cheap shots. These are data points. These are the physical realities of a man who is legally obese, famously refuses to exercise because he believes the human body is like a battery with a finite amount of energy. Yes, he actually said that. And subsists on a diet of fast food and Diet Coke.
And yet, look at the imagery his campaign sells you. Look at the flags on the back of the pickup trucks. They paint him as Rambo. They put his head on the body of a bodybuilder. They sell NFTs of him as a superhero with laser eyes. There is a multi-million-dollar industry dedicated to convincing you that this 79-year-old man who needs a golf cart to walk 700 yards and falls asleep in his own meetings is actually the pinnacle of human alpha male performance. It is absurd. It is laughable. But it is also dangerous, because while they were selling you the Superman lie, we saw the truth in 2024 during his criminal trials in New York. This is the part that everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten. He fell asleep in court constantly. It became a running joke among the reporters in the room. Maggie Haberman reported it. The sketch artist drew it. His own lawyers were seen nudging him to wake him up. And what did his defenders say then? The exact same thing Karoline Leavitt is saying now. He's praying, he's meditating, he's showing his contempt for the proceedings. No, he was napping. He was napping because he is an elderly man under immense stress who refuses to take care of himself. But here is where the media is failing us, and failing us badly. Imagine for 1 second if this were anyone else. Imagine if Barack Obama had fallen asleep during a cabinet meeting. Imagine if Joe Biden had needed a golf cart to travel 700 yards. It would be on the front page of the New York Times for a month. There'd be special reports on CNN questioning his fitness for office. Republicans in Congress would be drafting articles of impeachment under the 25th Amendment before the meeting was even over.
But with Trump, it gets graded on a curve. The media has sane-washed him for so long that we have lost our ability to be shocked. We shrug and say, well, that's just Trump being Trump. We normalize the abnormal. We treat his exhaustion as a quirk rather than a liability. And that is exactly what they are banking on. They are banking on you being so desensitized to his behavior, so beaten down by the constant chaos, that you stop asking the obvious questions. Questions like, if he is sleeping during the day, who is making the decisions? Questions like, if he is up all night rage posting, is he mentally clear enough to handle the nuclear codes? Questions like, why are we pretending that a man who can't stay awake for a discussion on tariffs is capable of negotiating with Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin? Because let me tell you something. Putin isn't sleeping in his meetings. Xi isn't checking out during economic briefings. Our adversaries are watching this clip too, and they aren't laughing. They're calculating. They're looking at a distracted, exhausted, low-energy American president, and they are seeing an opportunity. The Sleepy Joe projection was never just a campaign slogan. It was a shield. It was a preemptive strike designed to make you ignore the man behind the curtain. But the curtain just fell. And the man we see isn't a superhero. He isn't a stable genius. He is a tired, aging reality TV star who is clearly in over his head. And the people around him, the ones propping him up, the ones issuing these ridiculous statements, they know it better than anyone. They aren't protecting his dignity, they're protecting their own access to power. They're weekend at Berniesing the presidency of the United States.
But this brings us to the most terrifying question of all. The question that keeps me up at night, and the question that should be haunting every single person watching this video right now.
If the president is asleep, who is awake? If the commander-in-chief is checking out during high-level meetings, if he is treating the presidency like a retirement home with better security, then who is actually steering the ship? Because the ship doesn't stop moving just because the captain is taking a nap. Decisions are still being made, orders are still being drafted, policies are still being implemented. And this is where the Sleepy Dawn narrative stops being funny and starts being a constitutional crisis. Because we know who is in that room. We know who surrounds him. We aren't talking about the adults in the room like we saw in 2017. General Kelly is gone. Mattis is gone. The people who used to snatch papers off his desk to prevent him from doing something catastrophic, they are all gone. Instead, we have the sycophants, the enablers, the Project 2025 loyalists. We have people like Howard Lutnick, like Stephen Miller, like J.D. Vance. And let's be honest, these people want him asleep. Think about it. A disengaged, exhausted, distracted president is the perfect vessel for an extremist agenda. If he is too tired to read the fine print, he will sign whatever is put in front of him. If he is too busy rage posting on Truth Social to understand the nuances of a trade war or a military deployment, he will defer to the most aggressive voice in the room. We are looking at a presidency by proxy. We are looking at a shadow government operating in plain sight, using the figurehead of Donald Trump to push through policies that are deeply unpopular and deeply dangerous, all while the man at the top dozes off in his leather chair. They don't need his energy. They don't need his stamina. They just need his signature. And that is why the Republican silence right now is so deafening.
Where is the outrage from the constitutional conservatives? Where are the calls for cognitive tests? Remember when Nikki Haley demanded mental competency tests for politicians over 75? She said it was necessary for the safety of the nation. Well, Donald Trump is 79. We just watched him go unconscious in a cabinet meeting. Where is Nikki Haley today? Silent. Where is the Speaker of the House? He's probably claiming the video is AI generated or some other nonsense. Where are the calls for the 25th Amendment? Let's be extremely clear about this. If Joe Biden had done this, if there was video of Biden sleeping through a meeting in December 2025, Republicans would have already drafted the articles of removal. They would be holding emergency hearings. They would be on every cable news channel screaming that the country is leaderless. But because it is their guy, because it is their vessel for power, they are suddenly fine with a part-time president. They are fine with the marathon excuse. They are fine with the gaslighting. Because for the modern Republican Party, power is the only principle. They would rather have a comatose leader who rubber stamps their agenda than a conscious Democrat who protects the Constitution. And that brings us to the end game. This is what we warned about. This is what we said would happen. We said that a second Trump term wouldn't just be chaotic, it would be a decomposition of the executive branch. We are watching the office of the presidency be degraded in real time, turned into a backdrop for a man who cares more about his social media engagement than his daily intelligence briefing. So what happens next? They're betting on you getting tired. They're betting on you getting fatigued from the constant scandals. They want you to look at this video, laugh, shrug, and scroll past. They want to normalize this incompetence until it becomes just another background noise in American life. They want you to accept that this is the best we can do, but we cannot accept it. We cannot normalize it. We have to be the ones who stay awake. We have to be the ones who keep the receipts. We have to be the ones who point at the screen and say, no, that is not normal. No, that is not strength. That is a dereliction of duty. Because if we stop paying attention, if we let them gaslight us into silence, then we are just as asleep as he is. The White House wants you to believe he was listening attentively. The media wants to both sides this into oblivion. The GOP wants to pretend they don't see it, but we see it. We know what it is, and we are not going to let them get away with it. I'm Ethan Cole. Don't forget to subscribe because clearly someone needs to keep their eyes open.